The moment Olivia Thompson collapsed in the hay, she knew she had reached the end of her strength. But what she did not know was that this barn outside San Pedro, Texas, would become the place where her entire life would transform. Her hands trembled as she pulled herself deeper into the loft, her swollen belly making every movement a challenge. The August heat of 1878 pressed down on her like a heavy blanket, and dust motes danced in the shafts of sunlight that pierced through the weathered wooden slats. She had been walking for 3 days since Robert left her at that God-forsaken trading post, his promises of marriage evaporating like morning dew the moment she told him about the baby. The memory of his face, twisted with anger and fear, still haunted her. He had taken what little money she had and rode off without looking back, leaving her alone in a world that had no mercy for women in her condition. Olivia pressed her face into the sweet-smelling hay and allowed herself, for the first time in days, to cry. She was 5 months along, unmarried, penniless, and utterly alone. Her family back in Louisiana had made it clear what they thought of her decision to run away with Robert. Her father had shouted that she was dead to them, and her mother had simply turned away, tears streaming down her face. There was no going back, no home to return to, no safe harbor in the storm that had become her life. The barn was blessedly cool compared to the scorching afternoon sun outside. She could hear chickens clucking somewhere below, and the soft sounds of horses shifting in their stalls. Whoever owned this place clearly took good care of their animals. She pulled more hay around herself, creating a nest of sorts, and closed her eyes. Just a few hours of rest, she told herself. Just enough to gather her strength before moving on, though she had no idea where she would go. Sleep came quickly, born of exhaustion and despair. She did not hear the barn door open below, nor the footsteps of the man who came to check on his horses as the sun began to set. Henry Dalton had owned this small ranch outside San Pedro for 3 years, building it up from nothing with his own 2 hands after his father died, and left him enough money for a fresh start. He was a quiet man, 26 years old, with dark hair that always seemed to fall across his forehead no matter how many times he pushed it back. The people in town knew him as honest and hardworking, if perhaps a bit solitary. He preferred the company of horses to most people, finding them more reliable and less complicated. Henry was feeding his mare, Bella, when he heard the sound. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but years of living alone had made him attuned to every creak and whisper of his property. There it was again, a soft whimper from above, coming from the hayloft. His hand instinctively went to the rifle he kept mounted by the barn door. Drifters sometimes sought shelter in barns, and while he was not an unkind man, he had learned to be cautious. Texas in 1878 was still wild enough that a man needed to protect what was his. He moved quietly to the ladder that led up to the loft, listening. Another sound, definitely human, and it sounded like someone in distress. "I know someone is up there," he called out, his voice firm but not aggressive. "This is private property. You best come down and explain yourself." Olivia woke with a start, her heart hammering in her chest. For a moment she could not remember where she was, then it all came flooding back. The barn, her desperate need for rest, her foolish hope that she might go unnoticed until morning. She struggled to sit up, her body stiff and aching. "Please," she called down, her voice hoarse. "Please, I mean no harm. I will leave right away." Henry paused at the bottom of the ladder. The voice was female and there was genuine fear in it. He hesitated, his hand still on the rifle. "You sick? Injured?" "No, sir, just tired. I will go now, I promise." But when she tried to stand, the world tilted dangerously. She had eaten nothing but a handful of berries she had found along the road yesterday, and the baby seemed to be taking every bit of energy she had left. Her legs buckled and she sat down hard, gasping. Henry heard the thud and made a decision. He left the rifle and climbed the ladder quickly, his head emerging into the dim light of the loft. What he saw made him stop completely. A young woman sat in his hay, her dress torn and dirty, her dark hair falling loose from what had once been a neat braid. But it was her face that struck him first, pale and drawn with exhaustion, yet somehow still beautiful. And then he saw her condition, the swell of her belly unmistakable even in the fading light. "Lord have mercy," he said softly. Olivia looked at him with wide, frightened eyes. She had seen that look before, the moment when people realized what she was. An unwed mother, a fallen woman, someone to be scorned and cast out. She braced herself for the harsh words, the order to leave immediately, perhaps even worse. But Henry just climbed the rest of the way into the loft and sat back on his heels, studying her. "When did you last eat?" The question was so unexpected that Olivia could only stare at him. Yesterday morning, I think, some berries." He shook his head slowly. "And you are how far along?" 5 months. Her voice was barely a whisper. Henry was quiet for a moment, his mind working through the situation. Every decent bone in his body told him he could not turn a pregnant woman out, especially not in her condition. But letting a stranger stay, especially a woman, would set tongues wagging in San Pedro. Then again, he had never much cared what people thought. "Can you climb down the ladder?" he asked. Olivia nodded, though she was not sure it was true. "Then come on. Let us get some food in you before you faint dead away." He went down first, waiting at the bottom to help her. Olivia descended slowly, her arms shaking with effort. When she reached the bottom rung, her foot slipped, but Henry caught her easily, steadying her with strong hands. "Easy now," he said. "When did you last drink water?" "This morning." There was a creak. He muttered something under his breath that might have been a curse and guided her out of the barn toward the small house that sat about 50 yards away. It was a simple structure, 2 rooms and a porch, but it looked like heaven to Olivia. Inside, he pulled out a chair at the rough wooden table and practically pushed her into it. Then he was moving around the kitchen area, pumping water into a tin cup, slicing bread, pulling out a jar of preserves and some cold chicken left from his own dinner. "Eat slowly," he instructed, setting the food in front of her. "Small bites or you will just bring it back up." Olivia wanted to devour everything on the table, but she forced herself to follow his advice. The bread was fresh, probably baked yesterday, and the chicken was tender and flavorful. She had never tasted anything so good in her entire life. Henry sat across from her, watching as she ate. He should probably say something, ask the questions that needed asking, but he found himself reluctant to break the silence. She looked so fragile, so completely worn down that he felt an unexpected surge of protectiveness. Finally, when she had eaten about half of what he had given her and was sipping the water, he spoke. "I am Henry Dalton. This is my ranch." "Olivia Thompson," she replied quietly, not meeting his eyes. "I am sorry for trespassing, Mr. Dalton. I truly will leave if you want me to." "And go where?" She had no answer to that. "You got family somewhere, someone who can help you." Olivia shook her head, feeling tears threaten again. She was so tired of crying. "No, sir, no one. The father, gone." The word came out bitter and hard. Henry leaned back in his chair, his fingers drumming on the table. This was a complication he had not expected when he woke up this morning, but life had a way of throwing unexpected things at a person. His mother, God rest her soul, had always said that the measure of a man was how he treated those who could do nothing for him in return. "You can stay," he said abruptly. Olivia's head snapped up. "What?" "In the barn, in the loft. I will bring you meals and you can rest up until you figure out what you are going to do, but there are rules." "Anything," she said quickly. I will do anything you ask. You do not go into town. I do not need people getting ideas or starting talk. You stay on the property. And when you are feeling stronger, you help out around here. There is plenty of work that needs doing, mending and such. Can you cook? Yes, sir. My mother taught me. Good. My cooking is passable but nothing special. You can earn your keep that way. He paused, then added more gently, and you take care of yourself and that baby. No working yourself sick. Olivia felt something break open inside her chest, a flood of relief and gratitude so intense it was almost painful. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you so much, Mr. Dalton. I will not be any trouble, I swear it. Call me Henry. And you have already been trouble, Miss Thompson, but I reckon I can handle it. There was the faintest hint of a smile on his face, and Olivia found herself smiling back despite everything. That night, Henry made her a proper bed in the loft with blankets and a pillow from the house. He brought her a lantern and more water and told her to call out if she needed anything during the night. The house is right there, he said, pointing. I am a light sleeper. After he left, Olivia lay in her makeshift bed and stared up at the barn roof. For the first time in weeks, she felt something other than despair. It was not hope, not quite, but it was close. She placed her hand on her belly, feeling the baby move inside her. We are going to be all right, she whispered. I do not know how, but we are going to be all right. The days that followed fell into a rhythm that surprised both of them. Olivia woke with the sun and made her way to the house, where she would start breakfast while Henry tended to the animals. He had 4 horses, a milk cow, chickens, and a small vegetable garden that was struggling in the summer heat. The ranch was small but well maintained, everything in its place and carefully tended. At first, they barely spoke during meals. Henry was not a talkative man by nature, and Olivia was still too uncertain of her place to initiate conversation. But gradually, as she grew stronger and the color returned to her cheeks, they began to talk. She learned that he had come from Kansas, that his father had been a farmer who drank himself to death after Henry's mother died of fever. Henry had sold everything and headed south, wanting to start fresh somewhere no one knew him or his history. He had been in San Pedro for 3 years and had slowly built up the ranch through hard work and careful management. In turn, she told him about Louisiana, about her childhood on a small plantation that had never recovered from the war. Her father had tried to adapt to the new world, but he was a bitter man, angry at the loss of his way of life. Her mother had been gentler, but worn down by years of hardship and her husband's rage. When Olivia met Robert Turner at a church social, his smooth words and promises of a better life in Texas had seemed like a miracle. He said we would get married in San Antonio, she told Henry one morning as they worked together in the garden, she pulling weeds while he repaired a section of fence. He said his family had money, that they would welcome me. I believed every word. Some men are good liars, Henry said, driving a post into the ground with more force than necessary. I should have known better. My mother warned me, but I thought I knew best. Her voice caught. Now I have nothing, and my child will grow up a bastard. Henry looked at her across the rows of struggling vegetables. That child did not ask to be born into this situation. Neither did you, really. Robert Turner is the one who should be ashamed, not you. His words were simple, but they struck something deep inside Olivia. No one had said anything like that to her before. Everyone, including her own family, had acted as though this was entirely her fault, her sin, her shame to bear. Thank you, she said softly. Henry just nodded and went back to his work, but Olivia caught the slight softening around his eyes. As August turned into September, Olivia found herself settling into life on the ranch in ways she had not anticipated. She took over the cooking entirely, and Henry's appreciative comments about her fried chicken and biscuits made her smile. She mended his clothes, which had been held together by clumsy stitches and hope. She even helped him with the animals, learning to milk the cow and gather eggs, though he would not let her do anything too strenuous. "You are feeding too," he would say whenever she protested. "Let me handle the heavy work." Olivia noticed other things too. The way Henry always made sure she was comfortable before seeing to his own needs. How he would bring her little things from town, a peppermint stick or a ribbon, claiming he had gotten them cheap or found them, though she suspected he bought them just for her. The way his face softened when he looked at her, though he probably did not realize she noticed. She tried not to read too much into it. Henry was a kind man, and he was helping her out of Christian charity, nothing more. The last thing she needed was to develop feelings for another man, especially one who had shown her nothing but respect and decency. She had made that mistake once, and look where it had landed her. But her heart, it seemed, had ideas of its own. It was a warm evening in late September when everything changed. Olivia was washing dishes after supper while Henry sat at the table, going over his accounts. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and the air coming through the open window was finally beginning to cool. "Henry," she said suddenly, setting down the plate she was washing, "I have been thinking." "That is usually dangerous," he said, but his tone was teasing. "I cannot stay here forever. Winter is coming and I will be much further along by then. I should probably try to find work in San Pedro, maybe as a laundress or something." Henry's pen stopped moving. "You want to leave?" "Not want to, no, but it is not proper me staying here like this. And you have done so much for me already. I cannot take advantage of your kindness forever." He set down his pen carefully and looked at her. "What if I asked you to stay?" Olivia's heart began to beat faster. "What?" Henry stood up and walked over to where she stood by the wash basin. "I have been thinking, too, about your situation and about mine. This ranch is lonely, Olivia. I built it thinking it was all I needed, but these past weeks, having you here, it has made me realize what I have been missing. Henry, I do not understand what you are saying." He took a deep breath, as though steeling himself for something difficult. "I am saying that I want you to stay, not as a hired hand or out of charity. I am saying that if you were willing, we could make this arrangement permanent." "Permanent," she repeated, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. "Marriage," he said plainly. "I know it is not a love match, and Lord knows you have been through enough with men making promises, but I can promise you this. I will be good to you and to your child. I will give you both my name and my protection. You will never want for anything that I can provide." Olivia felt tears streaming down her face. "But why? Why would you do that for me?" Henry reached out and gently wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb. The gesture was so tender that it made her breath catch. "Because these past weeks have been the happiest I have had since I came to Texas. Because you make this house feel like a home. Because when I think about you leaving, about you and that baby out there alone, it makes my chest hurt. And because I think maybe, if you gave it time, you might come to care for me too." "I already do," she whispered. "I did not want to, I tried not to, but Henry, I do care for you. More than I should, probably." His face broke into a genuine smile, the first really big one she had ever seen from him. "Then is that a yes?" "Yes," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, I will marry you." Henry pulled her into his arms, careful of her belly, and held her close. Olivia rested her head against his chest and listened to the steady beat of his heart. For the first time in months, she felt truly safe. They were married a week later by the circuit preacher who passed through San Pedro once a month. Henry bought her a simple dress from the general store, pale blue cotton that fit loosely enough to accommodate her growing belly. She picked wildflowers from the field behind the barn to carry, and Henry wore his best shirt, the one she had carefully mended and pressed. The ceremony was brief, held in the small church in San Pedro with the preacher's wife and the store owner as witnesses. Henry had explained the situation simply. Olivia was a widow whose husband had died on the trail, and he was giving her and her child a home. It was a common enough story in Texas, where death and hardship were everyday occurrences. If anyone suspected the truth, they kept it to themselves. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Henry kissed her gently, his lips soft and warm against hers. It was nothing like Robert's demanding kisses, full of possession and heat. This was tender, almost reverent, and it made Olivia's heart swell with an emotion she was afraid to name. That night back at the ranch, Henry made up a bed for himself on the floor of the main room. "What are you doing?" Olivia asked, confused. "You take the bed," he said, spreading out blankets. "I know we are married now, but I do not want to rush you into anything. We have time to figure all that out." Olivia stood in the doorway, her hand on her belly where the baby was doing what felt like somersaults. "Henry Dalton, you are the kindest man I have ever known." He looked up at her, his dark eyes serious in the lamplight. "I just want you to be happy, Olivia. That is all I want." She crossed the room and knelt down beside him, awkward with her bulk. "I am happy. Happier than I have been in a very long time. But we are married now, and that means we face things together. You do not need to sleep on the floor in your own house." "Are you sure?" "I am sure." They lay together that night in the narrow bed, Henry's arm around her, her back against his chest. He held her carefully as though she were something precious and breakable. The baby kicked against his hand and she felt him startle. "That is strong," he said, wonder in his voice. "He or she is very active," Olivia said, "especially at night." Henry was quiet for a moment, then asked, "Does it frighten you?" "The birth, I mean." "Terribly," she admitted. "I have heard stories, and without my mother or any other women to help. There is a midwife in San Pedro, Mrs. Chen. Her husband runs the laundry. I will make sure she is here when your time comes. I will not let you go through this alone." Olivia turned in his arms to face him. In the moonlight coming through the window, she could see the strong lines of his face, the sincerity in his eyes. "I do not deserve you." "You deserve everything good in this world," he said firmly. "And I am going to do my damnedest to give it to you." October arrived with cooler temperatures and the first hints of autumn. Olivia's belly continued to grow, and Henry fussed over her like a mother hen, insisting she rest more and work less. She found it endearing and exasperating in equal measure. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," she protested one afternoon when he insisted on carrying a basket of laundry that could not have weighed more than a few pounds. "Humor me," he said, and she could not help but smile. The ranch was thriving under their combined efforts. Olivia's cooking and household management freed up time for Henry to focus on the animals and the land. He bought 2 more horses and was talking about expanding the herd come spring. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch together, watching the sun set over the Texas landscape and talk about the future. "I was thinking we should add on to the house," Henry said one night. "Another room, maybe 2. A child needs space to grow, and maybe someday there will be more children." Olivia felt her cheeks warm. They had still not consummated their marriage. Henry continued to hold her at night, to kiss her gently, but he never pushed for more. She appreciated his patience, but she was also beginning to want more from him, to want the kind of closeness that came from being truly married. "Henry," she said carefully, "about children, about us." He looked at her questioningly. "I know we married for practical reasons. To give the baby a name, to give me security. But it has been almost 2 months now, and I want you to know that I do not think of this as just an arrangement anymore." What do you think of it as? His voice was quiet, hopeful. As a real marriage, as something I want, not just something I need. She took a breath. I know I am large and ungainly right now, but I want to be a real wife to you, Henry, in every way. He reached over and took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. You are beautiful, Olivia. You have never been anything but beautiful to me. And I have wanted you as my wife, my real wife, since before we even married. But I did not want to pressure you, not after what you had been through. You could never be like him, she said firmly. You are nothing like Robert. You are good and kind and patient, and I want this. I want you. That night, in the privacy of their bedroom, Henry made love to his wife for the first time. He was gentle and careful, mindful of her condition, and Olivia felt tears on her cheeks as she finally understood what it meant to be with a man who truly cared for her. This was not about possession or lust. This was about connection, about two people choosing each other and making a family. Afterward, lying in his arms, she whispered, I love you, Henry Dalton. She felt him still, then his arms tightened around her. Say that again. I love you. I think I have for a while now, but I was afraid to say it. I love you too, he said, his voice rough with emotion. I have been in love with you since the day I found you in my barn, looking scared and fierce and brave all at once. I have been yours since that moment, Olivia. She turned to kiss him, and in that kiss was everything they felt for each other, all the hope and promise of the life they were building together. November brought the first frost, and the knowledge that the baby would be coming soon. Henry made the trip to San Pedro to speak with Mrs. Chen, the midwife, who agreed to come stay at the ranch when Olivia's time was near. He also bought fabric, and Olivia spent her afternoons sewing baby clothes and blankets, her hands moving in the steady rhythm her mother had taught her years ago. One afternoon, as she sat on the porch with her sewing, a rider approached. Olivia tensed automatically. They rarely had visitors, and she was always nervous about being seen, about someone asking too many questions about her condition and her sudden marriage. But Henry came out of the barn, wiping his hands on a rag, and greeted the rider with a wave. Sheriff Morrison, what brings you out this way? The sheriff was an older man with a weathered face and kind eyes. He dismounted and shook Henry's hand. Just making rounds, checking on folks before winter sets in proper. Wanted to make sure you and the missus were doing all right. We are doing fine, thank you. Come meet my wife. Henry gestured for Olivia to join them. She set aside her sewing and walked over, trying not to waddle too obviously. The sheriff tipped his hat to her. Madam, it is a pleasure. Henry here told us he had gotten married, but this is the first time I have had the chance to meet you proper. The pleasure is mine, Sheriff, Olivia said, keeping her voice steady. When are you due? Around Christmas, we think, Henry answered, putting his arm around Olivia's shoulders. The gesture was both protective and proprietary, and it made her feel safe. Well, that is a fine Christmas present. You folks need anything, you let me know. Winter can be hard out here, especially for city folk. He looked at Olivia kindly. Actually, I am from Louisiana, Olivia said. I am used to hard winters. This was not entirely true. Louisiana winters were mild compared to Texas, but the sheriff just nodded approvingly. Good, good. Well, I will leave you folks to it. Henry, you keep taking good care of this lady. I intend to, Henry said firmly. After the sheriff left, Olivia let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. That went better than I feared. People in San Pedro are good folks for the most part, Henry said. They do not pry too much into other people's business. As far as they are concerned, you are my wife, and that is all that matters. But not everyone was so incurious. A few days later, when Henry went to town for supplies, he ran into Tom Whitfield, a rancher whose spread bordered Henry's property to the north. Tom was a gossipy man who liked to know everyone's business. "Heard you got yourself a wife, Dalton," Tom said, leaning against the counter of the general store. "Pretty sudden, was not it?" "When you know, you know," Henry said mildly, selecting a bag of flour. "And a baby on the way already. You work fast." There was an insinuating tone in Tom's voice that made Henry's jaw tighten. "My wife is a widow," Henry said, his voice cool. "Her husband died on the trail to San Antonio. I was fortunate enough to be able to offer her and her child a home." "A widow, huh? Funny, nobody in town seems to recall seeing her before your wedding." Henry set down the flour and turned to face Tom fully. "Is there a point you are trying to make, Whitfield?" Tom held up his hands. "No offense meant, just curious is all." "Well, you know what they say about curiosity. It killed the cat." Henry's voice was pleasant, but there was steel underneath. "My wife's past is her own business, and I would appreciate it if you and anyone else minded your own affairs." Tom backed off, but Henry knew the rumors would spread anyway. Small towns thrived on gossip, especially about newcomers. He bought his supplies and headed home, fuming. When he told Olivia about the encounter, she paled. "Maybe I should have stayed hidden. I am going to ruin your reputation." "My reputation can handle it," Henry said firmly. "And I do not give a damn what Tom Whitfield or anyone else thinks. You are my wife, and that baby is going to be my child in every way that matters. Let them talk." But the talk did come, whispers and speculation that filtered back to them through various channels. Some people were sympathetic, others judgmental. Henry found himself excluded from a few social gatherings, though that did not bother him much. He had never been one for parties anyway. What did bother him was when the preacher's wife stopped by one afternoon, ostensibly to bring a basket of preserves, but really to lecture Olivia about the importance of moral rectitude. "A child conceived outside of wedlock is a sign of sin, Mrs. Patterson said primly, sitting in Olivia's kitchen and sipping tea. "I do hope you have repented and sought God's forgiveness." Olivia felt anger rise in her chest, hot and fierce. Before she could respond, Henry, who had been outside and heard the last part as he came in, spoke up. "Mrs. Patterson, I appreciate you stopping by, but I think it is time for you to leave." The older woman looked startled. "Mr. Dalton, I am only trying to provide spiritual guidance. What you are providing is judgment and condemnation, and neither one is welcome in my home. My wife has nothing to repent for. She was betrayed by a man who made her promises and broke them. If anyone needs to repent, it is him. But the Bible also says, judge not lest ye be judged, and let he who is without sin cast the first stone. I suggest you take those words to heart before you come into my home and upset my wife." Henry held the door open. "Good day, Mrs. Patterson." After she left in a huff, Olivia burst into tears. Henry gathered her into his arms, holding her while she sobbed against his chest. "I am sorry," he murmured into her hair. "I am sorry people are so cruel. You defended me," she said between sobs. "No one has ever defended me like that." "I will always defend you," he promised. "Always." That night, as they lay in bed, Olivia felt the baby moving more actively than usual. She took Henry's hand and placed it on her belly, and they both felt the strong kicks. "He is going to be a fighter," Henry said softly. "Or she," Olivia reminded him. "Or she," he agreed. "Either way, this child is going to know every day that they are loved and wanted. I promise you that." Olivia believed him. In the months since she had stumbled into his barn, Henry had proven himself over and over. He was a man of his word, steady and true. December arrived with cold winds and the threat of snow. Olivia was huge now, uncomfortable and anxious. Mrs. Chen, the midwife, came to stay in the spare room Henry had hastily built. She was a practical woman in her 50s, originally from China but married to an Irishman who ran the laundry in San Pedro. She spoke with a slight accent, but her English was perfect, and she had delivered half the babies in the county. "First baby always take long time," she told Olivia matter-of-factly. "You be patient, do what I say, everything be fine." On December 20th, just after dawn, Olivia woke to a strange sensation, a tightening across her belly that was different from the false contractions she had been experiencing. She lay still for a moment, wondering if it was her imagination, then felt it again, stronger this time. "Henry," she whispered, shaking his shoulder. He woke instantly, the way he always did. "What is wrong? I think it is time." Henry was out of bed in seconds, pulling on his pants and boots. "I will get Mrs. Chen." The next hours were a blur of pain and effort. Mrs. Chen was a calm, commanding presence, telling Olivia when to push and when to rest. Henry stayed by her side the whole time, letting her squeeze his hand until she was sure she was breaking bones, wiping her face with a cool cloth, whispering encouragement. "You are doing so well," he told her. "So strong, Olivia. I am so proud of you." When the baby finally came, just as the sun was setting, it was with a lusty cry that filled the small house. Mrs. Chen wrapped the infant in a clean blanket and placed it in Olivia's arms. "You have son," she announced with a smile. "Healthy, strong boy." Olivia looked down at the tiny face, red and wrinkled and perfect, and felt her heart crack open with love. The baby had dark hair like hers and the most beautiful little fingers she had ever seen. He was screaming his displeasure at being forced into the cold world, his face scrunched up in outrage. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "Hello, my sweet boy." Henry looked at his wife and the baby in her arms, and Olivia saw tears in his eyes. "He is perfect," Henry said, his voice thick. "Absolutely perfect." "Would you like to hold him?" Olivia asked. Henry took the baby carefully, as though he were made of glass. The infant quieted almost immediately, his tiny eyes trying to focus on this new face above him. Henry looked completely overwhelmed, his usual composure shattered by the weight of the small life in his arms. "Hello, son," he said softly. "I am your papa. I am going to take such good care of you and your mama. I promise." Olivia felt tears streaming down her face, but they were good tears, happy tears. This was nothing like she had imagined when she was trudging down that dusty road in August, alone and terrified. This was a family, real and true and hers. They named him Thomas, after Henry's father, with the middle name James after Olivia's grandfather. Mrs. Chen stayed for a week, making sure both mother and baby were healthy and teaching Olivia how to nurse and care for a newborn. Henry was an eager student, learning how to change diapers and swaddle and soothe the baby when he cried. "Most men not so interested," Mrs. Chen observed approvingly. "You lucky woman, Mrs. Dalton." "I know," Olivia said, watching Henry walk the floor with Thomas, singing a soft, tuneless lullaby. "I know I am." Christmas came with a light snow, rare for San Pedro but magical nonetheless. Olivia had recovered well from the birth, and though she was still tired and sore, she insisted on cooking a special dinner. Henry had bought a small tree from town, and they decorated it with strings of popcorn and cranberries that Olivia had made. On Christmas morning, Henry gave her a necklace, a simple silver chain with a small cross pendant. "It was my mother's," he said as he fastened it around her neck. "I want you to have it." Olivia touched the cross, feeling the weight of the gift, the significance of it. "Henry, I cannot. You are my family now," he said. "You and Thomas. My mother would have loved you and she would have wanted you to have it." Olivia's gift to him was more practical. A new shirt she had sewn from fabric she had bought with egg money, kept secret for weeks. But she had also written him a letter, pouring out all her feelings, everything she loved about him and how grateful she was for the life they were building together. Henry read it with tears in his eyes, then pulled her close and kissed her thoroughly. "This is the best Christmas I have ever had," he said. "For me too," she agreed, and meant it with all her heart. Winter passed into spring, and Thomas grew from a tiny newborn into a chubby, smiling baby who adored his parents. Olivia had never known she could feel such fierce, protective love for another person. And watching Henry with Thomas, seeing the patience and tenderness he showed, made her fall even more deeply in love with her husband. One afternoon in April, as Olivia sat on the porch with Thomas asleep in her lap, she saw a rider approaching. Her first instinct was still to tense, to worry, but she had learned to trust that they were safe here. The rider was a woman, which was unusual. She rode confidently, sitting tall in the saddle, and as she got closer, Olivia could see she was young, perhaps 25, with red hair braided down her back. Henry came out of the barn to greet her. "Can I help you, madam?" The woman dismounted and smiled. "Are you Henry Dalton?" "I am." "My name is Catherine Wells. I am the new schoolteacher in San Pedro. The town council asked me to ride out to the ranches and let families know that we are opening a proper school in the fall. That is good to know, though my son is a bit young for school yet." Henry gestured to Thomas, who was just beginning to wake up. Catherine smiled. "It is never too early to think about education. I also wanted to introduce myself to the families in the area. May I speak with your wife?" Olivia had already stood up, shifting Thomas to her hip. "I am Olivia Dalton." The two women shook hands, and Catherine's smile was warm and genuine. "It is lovely to meet you. I have heard about you in town." Olivia stiffened slightly. "Have you? Nothing bad," Catherine assured her quickly. "Just that you and Mr. Dalton married last fall, and that you have a beautiful baby boy. Mrs. Chen speaks very highly of you." "Mrs. Chen is a wonderful woman," Olivia said, relaxing slightly. Catherine glanced between Olivia and Henry, and her expression softened. "If you do not mind me saying, it is nice to see a young family doing so well out here. It can be lonely in Texas, especially for women. I hope we can be friends, Mrs. Dalton." Olivia felt something loosen in her chest. Since moving to the ranch, she had been so isolated, so afraid of judgment, that she had not realized how much she missed female friendship. "I would like that very much." Catherine became a regular visitor, riding out every few weeks to share books and conversation. She had been raised in Boston but moved to Texas after her fiancé died in a railroad accident, wanting to start fresh somewhere new. She understood Olivia's need to escape the past, and the two women formed a genuine friendship. Through Catherine, Olivia slowly became more integrated into the San Pedro community. She attended church socials, bringing her excellent pecan pie and holding her head high when people whispered. Henry was always at her side, his steady presence a reminder that she was not alone. Some people remained cold, like Mrs. Patterson and Tom Whitfield, but others proved unexpectedly kind. The sheriff and his wife invited them to dinner. The owner of the general store always set aside the best fabric when it came in, knowing Olivia loved to sew. Mrs. Chen became like a grandmother to Thomas, stopping by regularly to bring treats and check on the family. Summer arrived with its punishing heat, but Olivia had learned to adapt. She worked in the garden in the early morning before the sun got too high, and spent the hottest part of the day inside with Thomas, teaching him to clap and laugh. He was walking now, tottering around on chubby legs, getting into everything. One evening in July, almost exactly a year after Olivia had first hidden in the barn, she and Henry sat on the porch watching Thomas play in the dirt with a wooden horse Henry had carved for him. "You ever think about that day?" Henry asked. "When I found you in the barn." "All the time," Olivia admitted. "I think about how scared I was, how certain I was that my life was over. And then you climbed up that ladder and asked me to stay, and everything changed." "I did not ask you to stay that first day," Henry pointed out. "I told you that you could rest and then figure out what to do next. But you did ask me to stay. Later, you asked me to marry you, to build a life with you. You gave me and Thomas everything." She reached over and took his hand. "You saved us, Henry." He shook his head. "You saved yourself, Olivia. You had the courage to leave Louisiana, to survive when you were abandoned, to keep going when most people would have given up. All I did was give you a safe place to land." "You gave me love," she said softly. "That is more than a safe place. You gave me a home and a family and a future. You loved Thomas before he was even born, loved him knowing he was not yours by blood." "He is mine in every way that matters," Henry said firmly. "And I want more children with you, Olivia. I want to fill this house with family if you are willing." Olivia smiled. "I am willing. I want that too." That night they made love with the windows open to catch any breeze, and Olivia thought about how far she had come. From that desperate girl hiding in a barn to this woman, loved and cherished and safe. By autumn, Olivia was pregnant again. This time there was no fear, no shame, only joy. Henry was beside himself with excitement, already planning to expand the house even more. Thomas, now walking and talking in simple words, seemed to understand that something was changing, and he would pat Olivia's belly and say "baby" with great importance. Catherine threw Olivia a small party with some of the women from town, and they brought gifts and advice. Even Mrs. Patterson attended, though she was stiff and formal. But when Thomas toddled over and handed her a flower he had picked, even her stern face softened. "He is a sweet child," she admitted grudgingly. "He takes after his father," Olivia said, looking pointedly at Henry, who was standing in the corner looking uncomfortable among so many women. The baby, a girl they named Sarah Ann, was born in April of 1880, just after Thomas's first birthday. The labor was easier this time, and Sarah came into the world with less fuss than her brother, blinking up at her parents with solemn blue eyes. "She has your eyes," Olivia told Henry, cradling their daughter. "And your nose," Henry said, touching the tiny button nose gently. "She is beautiful, just like her mother." Thomas was fascinated by his new sister, wanting to touch her constantly. Henry taught him to be gentle, to stroke her soft hair carefully. "She is little," he would say seriously, as though he had not been just as little himself not so long ago. The ranch continued to prosper. Henry bought more land and more horses, building a reputation for breeding quality animals. Olivia's garden flourished, and she started selling her preserves and baked goods in town, earning her own money that she squirreled away in a jar in the kitchen. "What are you saving for?" Henry asked one day, noticing the jar. "I want to buy you something special," she said. "You have given me so much. I want to give you something too." What she eventually bought him was a pocket watch, silver and engraved with his initials. She gave it to him on their second wedding anniversary, and he was so touched he could barely speak. "You did not need to do this," he said, running his thumb over the smooth metal. "I wanted to. I wanted you to have something to remember that you are loved, that you have a family who treasures you." He pulled her into his arms, careful not to crush Sarah, who was sleeping in a sling against Olivia's chest. "I love you so much, Olivia Dalton. More than I ever thought it was possible to love another person." "I love you too," she said. "You are the best man I have ever known." The years passed, marked by the changing seasons and the growth of their children. Thomas started school when he was 5, riding into town with Henry every morning and coming home full of stories about what he had learned. Sarah was a quieter child, content to help her mother in the garden or play with the barn cats. In 1882, Olivia gave birth to twin boys, Samuel and Benjamin, who turned the house into chaos with their endless energy and mischief. Henry built on 2 more rooms and a proper second story, transforming the simple house into something substantial. "We are going to need to add on again at this rate," he joked after Olivia told him she was pregnant with their 5th child in 1884. This baby, another girl they named Margaret but called Maggie, was born in the winter and had Olivia's dark hair and Henry's smile. She was a happy baby, laughing at everything, and even the twins, usually too busy with their own adventures, would stop to make faces at her and hear her giggle. Life was not without its challenges. There were hard winters and dry summers, sick animals and failed crops. Thomas broke his arm falling from a horse when he was 8, and Sarah had a frightening bout of fever that had Olivia sitting up with her for 3 straight nights. The twins got into everything, once nearly burning down the barn when they snuck in matches to see better. But through it all, Olivia and Henry faced each challenge together. Their love, which had started as a practical arrangement and grown into something deep and true, was the foundation on which everything else was built. One evening in the summer of 1885, when Thomas was 7, Sarah 5, the twins 3, and Maggie just learning to walk, the whole family gathered on the porch after supper. It had become a tradition, this time together, watching the sun set over the land they had built their life on. Thomas was reading a book Catherine had lent him, sounding out the harder words. Sarah was braiding wildflowers into a crown. The twins were trying to catch fireflies in jars, and Maggie was toddling between everyone, spreading chaos and joy in equal measure. Olivia sat with her head on Henry's shoulder, his arm around her waist. "Did you ever imagine this?" she asked quietly. "When you found me in your barn that day, did you imagine we would have all this?" Henry was quiet for a moment, considering. "No," he said honestly. "I thought maybe I would help you get back on your feet, maybe give the baby a name, and then you would move on. I never imagined you would stay. I never imagined you would love me." "I never imagined I could be this happy," Olivia confessed. "After Robert left, I thought my life was over. I thought I would spend the rest of my days alone, scorned, struggling just to survive. And then you asked me to stay." "Best decision I ever made," Henry said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Papa, Mama, look," Samuel called, holding up his jar full of fireflies. The tiny lights blinked on and off, magical in the gathering darkness. "Beautiful, sweetheart," Olivia called back. "But remember to let them go before you come inside." "Why?" Benjamin asked. "Because they need to be free to fly," Henry explained. "We can enjoy them for a little while, but they were not made to live in jars." The boys considered this, then nodded seriously and unscrewed the lids, watching as the fireflies floated up into the darkening sky. Thomas looked up from his book. "Mama, was my first papa a good man?" The question came out of nowhere, and Olivia felt Henry tense beside her. They had known this day would come, when Thomas would start asking questions about where he came from. They had agreed to always be honest with him. "Your first papa was very charming," Olivia said carefully. "But he was not a good man, Thomas. A good man does not abandon the people who need him." "Like Papa Henry," Thomas said. "He does not abandon us." "No, he does not," Olivia agreed, feeling tears prick her eyes. Thomas seemed to think about this. "I am glad I have Papa Henry instead." Henry cleared his throat roughly. "I am glad I have you too, son, all of you." That night, after all the children were finally asleep, Henry and Olivia lay in their bed, holding each other in the darkness. "You think he will resent me?" Henry asked. "When he is older, when he understands more about how he came to be mine." "Never," Olivia said firmly. You are his father in every way that counts. You are the one who walks the floor with him when he has nightmares. You are the one teaching him to ride and read and be a good man. Blood does not make a father, Henry. Love does. I do love him, Henry said, just as much as the others. I know you do, and he knows it too. The years continued to roll by, each one bringing new challenges and new joys. The ranch grew into one of the most successful in the area, known for quality horses and honest dealing. Henry took on a couple of hired hands to help with the work, good men who treated Olivia with respect and played with the children during breaks. Thomas grew into a serious, studious boy who loved books as much as he loved horses. Sarah was gentle and kind, always bringing home injured animals to nurse back to health. The twins were hellions but good-hearted, and Maggie was turning into a little beauty with a will of iron. In 1888, when Olivia was 30 and Henry 34, they had their sixth and final child, a boy they named Henry Dalton, Jr. He was a calm baby, content to watch the world with wise eyes, and he completed their family perfectly. Catherine, who had become Olivia's closest friend, married the doctor who had moved to San Pedro the year before. She continued teaching, and her own children eventually joined the Dalton brood in their adventures. The ranch outside San Pedro became a gathering place for the community. Olivia's generous nature and Henry's steady leadership made them respected, and the whispers and judgment from those early days had long since faded. The Daltons were simply part of the fabric of the town, as much a fixture as the church or the general store. On their 10th wedding anniversary in 1888, Henry took Olivia on a picnic, just the two of them, leaving the children with Catherine and her husband. They rode out to a spot on their land where a small creek ran through a grove of oak trees, the same spot where Henry had proposed all those years ago. "I wanted to come back here," Henry said as they spread out a blanket, "to the place where everything really started." "I thought everything started in your barn," Olivia teased. "That is where I found you," Henry agreed. "But this is where I asked you to marry me. This is where you said yes and gave me the greatest gift of my life." "What gift is that? A family, a home, a purpose beyond just surviving." He took her hands in his. "I was so lonely before you, Olivia. I did not even realize how lonely until you were here, filling my life with light and noise and love. I was broken when I found you," Olivia said softly. "Scared and ashamed and certain my life was over. You put me back together, Henry. You showed me that I was worthy of love and respect. You gave me back my faith in goodness." They sat together by the creek, eating the food Olivia had packed and talking about everything and nothing. They talked about the children, about Thomas's desire to go to university someday, about Sarah's talent with animals, about the twins' endless schemes, about Maggie's fierce independence, about little Henry's sweet nature. They talked about the ranch, about the plans to buy more land to the south, about building a proper barn to replace the old one where they had met. They talked about their hopes and dreams, about growing old together, about watching their children build lives of their own. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, Henry pulled Olivia into his arms and kissed her with all the passion and tenderness of a man deeply in love with his wife. "Thank you," he whispered against her lips. "Thank you for staying. Thank you for choosing me. Thank you for this beautiful life. Thank you for climbing up into that barn and seeing me," Olivia replied. "Thank you for not turning me away. Thank you for loving not just me but my child, for making him yours in every way that mattered." "Our child," Henry corrected gently. "They are all our children, every single one of them." And in that moment, with the Texas sun setting behind them and the sounds of the creek burbling nearby, Olivia understood fully the miracle of what had happened that day in August 1878. She had been at her lowest point, abandoned and alone, and she had found refuge in a stranger's barn. That stranger had climbed up and asked her to stay, and in staying, she had found everything she had ever wanted but never dared to hope for: love, family, home, purpose, healing. Thomas graduated from the local school at the top of his class in 1891, and did indeed go to university, studying law at Henry's insistence and with financial support. "Every child should have the chance to be more than their parents," Henry said when Thomas protested that it was too much money. Sarah took over much of the horse breeding operation, having a natural gift with the animals that surpassed even Henry's. She was courted by several young men from town, but she took her time choosing, wanting to be sure. The twins eventually settled down, channeling their energy into ranching and proving to have good heads for business. They helped expand the operation, buying cattle and starting a beef business alongside the horses. Maggie was the wild one, insisting on learning to rope and ride as well as any boy, scandalizing some of the older women in town but making her parents proud with her fierce spirit. Little Henry grew into a gentle soul who loved books and music, learning to play the fiddle and entertaining the family on long winter evenings. As the years passed and the children grew, Olivia and Henry's love only deepened. They had weathered storms, both literal and figurative, had built something lasting and true from the most unlikely beginning. In 1895, when Olivia was 37 and Henry 43, they sat on their porch on a warm spring evening, watching their grandchildren play. Thomas had married a lovely girl from Austin and had 2 children of his own. Sarah had finally chosen a husband, the veterinarian who had moved to San Pedro, and they were expecting their first child. "We did good," Henry said, watching young Thomas chase his cousins around the yard while his sister, barely 2, toddled after them. "We did very good," Olivia agreed, her hand in his. "You ever regret it?" Henry asked. "Taking a chance on a stranger who found you in his barn?" Olivia turned to look at him, this man who had been her salvation and her love, who had shown her what it meant to be truly cherished. His hair was starting to gray at the temples, and there were lines around his eyes from years of squinting into the Texas sun, but to her, he was as handsome as the day she first really looked at him. "Not for a single second," she said. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Henry Dalton. You and our family, this life we built together. I would live through every hard moment again if it meant ending up here with you. I love you, Olivia. I have loved you from the moment I saw you in that barn, looking fierce and frightened and beautiful. I will love you until the day I die and beyond." "And I love you," she replied. "My hero, my husband, my home." They sat together as the sun set, surrounded by the sounds of their family, their legacy, their love made manifest. And Olivia thought back to that desperate girl who had climbed into a barn loft 17 years ago, certain her life was over. How wrong she had been. Her life had not ended that day. It had only just begun. The years continued their steady march, bringing both joy and sorrow as all lives do. Henry's hired hands became like family, their own children growing up alongside the Dalton brood. The ranch prospered through good years and survived the lean ones, a testament to Henry's careful management and the family's hard work. In 1898, as the century drew to a close, Olivia stood in the kitchen of the big house that had grown room by room to accommodate their expanding family. She was 40, still beautiful though her dark hair now had threads of silver running through it. She was making bread, her hands moving through the familiar motions her mother had taught her so long ago in Louisiana. Through the window, She could see Henry in the corral, working with one of the young horses. At 46, he was still strong and capable, though he moved a bit more carefully than he once had. He looked up as though feeling her gaze and waved, that smile she loved so much spreading across his face. Their youngest, Henry Jr., now 10, was helping his father, his small face serious with concentration. The bond between father and son was beautiful to watch, and Olivia felt her heart swell with gratitude. The door opened and Sarah came in, her belly round with her third child. "Mama, I am going to need your help with the preserves. I cannot seem to get them to set properly." "Of course, darling. Let me just get this bread in the oven." Working side by side with her daughter, teaching her the tricks and techniques that had been passed down through generations, Olivia felt the weight of legacy. She thought about her own mother, who had died 5 years ago without ever reconciling with Olivia. The news had come through a cousin, a simple letter stating the facts without emotion. Olivia had cried for what might have been, for the relationship they never had, for the grandchildren her mother had refused to meet. But Henry had held her through it, reminding her that she had built her own family, created her own legacy of love and acceptance. "Tell me again how you and Papa met," Sarah said, as she had many times over the years. Olivia smiled. "I was at my lowest point, desperate and afraid. I hid in his barn, thinking I could rest for just a few hours before moving on. But your father found me, and instead of turning me away, he showed me kindness. And he asked you to stay," Sarah finished, having heard the story countless times but never tiring of it. "He did. He asked me to stay, and I said yes, and that decision changed everything." Later that evening, after supper had been eaten and the dishes washed, after young Henry had been tucked into bed with a story, Olivia and Henry took their customary walk around the property. It was something they tried to do every evening, this time alone together, talking about the day and their plans for tomorrow. "Thomas wrote," Henry said, pulling a letter from his pocket. "He is doing well in Austin. They want us to come visit next month. That would be lovely. We could take the train, make a little trip of it." They walked in comfortable silence for a while, their steps synchronized after so many years together. The night was clear, stars scattered across the sky like diamonds on velvet. "You ever think about that day in the barn?" Henry asked. "I know I have asked before, but sometimes I still cannot believe it all really happened. That I found you, that you stayed, that we built all this." "I think about it often," Olivia admitted, "especially when things are hard or uncertain. I remind myself that I survived the worst moment of my life, and that survival led me to the best thing in my life. You." Henry stopped walking and turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "I want you to know something, Olivia. I want you to know that finding you, asking you to stay, marrying you, it was not charity or pity or obligation. Even in those early days before I really knew you, I felt drawn to you. And every day since, I have fallen more in love with you. You are my partner, my best friend, my heart." Tears filled Olivia's eyes. "Henry Dalton, after all these years, you can still make me cry with your sweet words. Good tears, I hope." "The best tears," she assured him, standing on her toes to kiss him. The new century came with celebration and hope. The Dalton family gathered at the ranch for New Year's Eve 1900, 3 generations under one roof. Thomas and his family had come from Austin. Sarah and her husband lived close enough to visit regularly. The twins, now running their own small spread with their father's help, brought their wives. Maggie, 18 and full of fire, was courting a young man from San Antonio who looked appropriately terrified of her. And young Henry was everywhere, soaking up attention from his siblings and their families. As midnight approached, they all gathered on the porch, counting down the final seconds of the old century. When the clock struck 12, cheers erupted, and Henry pulled Olivia close, kissing her soundly while their children and grandchildren laughed and applauded. "To the new century," Thomas called out, raising his glass, "and to the family that raised us to meet it with courage and love." "To Mama and Papa," Sarah added, her own glass raised, "who showed us what true love looks like." Olivia looked around at the faces surrounding her, all these people who existed, because she had climbed into a barn loft one desperate August day, and because a kind man had chosen to help rather than turn away. This was her legacy, not shame or scandal, but love multiplied, a family built on the foundation of one man's kindness and one woman's courage. The years of the new century brought changes to San Pedro and to Texas. Automobiles began to appear on the roads, though horses were still the primary means of transportation. The railroad expanded, connecting small towns to bigger cities. The world was modernizing, moving forward, and the Dalton family moved with it while holding tight to the values that mattered. In 1905, Olivia and Henry celebrated their 27th wedding anniversary. Their children were all grown now, building lives of their own, though they remained close to the ranch and to their parents. There were 10 grandchildren with more on the way, and the big house was always full of noise and laughter when the family gathered. One afternoon in late summer, Olivia was working in her garden when she heard horses approaching. Looking up, she saw a sight that made her heart stop. A man rode toward the house, and though it had been nearly 30 years, she recognized him immediately. Robert Turner had aged poorly. His face was weathered and hard, and he sat his horse like a man who had lived a difficult life. He saw Olivia in the garden and dismounted, tying his horse to the fence. "Olivia," he said, his voice rough, "I thought that was you." Olivia stood frozen, her mind racing. Henry was out on the range with the twins, not due back until evening. She was alone with the man who had abandoned her all those years ago. "What are you doing here, Robert?" Her voice was steady, though her hands trembled slightly. "I have been in San Antonio, heard talk of a successful ranch run by a man named Dalton and his wife Olivia. Got curious." He looked around, taking in the prosperous ranch, the big house, the evidence of success and stability. "You did all right for yourself. No thanks to you," he had the grace to look ashamed. "I know I did you wrong, Olivia. I have thought about it over the years, about what I did. I was young and scared and stupid." "You were cruel," Olivia said, her voice hardening. "You left me alone and pregnant with nothing. I could have died, Robert. My child could have died. Did you? Did you have the baby I did? A son?" He is 27 now, studying law in Austin, married with children of his own. Robert's face twisted with some emotion Olivia could not quite read. "A son? I have a son." "No," Olivia said firmly. "You have nothing. Thomas is my husband's son in every way that matters. Henry Dalton raised him, loved him, gave him a good life and a good name. You are nothing to him, and you will remain nothing." "I could tell him the truth," Robert said, and there was something ugly in his voice now. "I could tell everyone in San Pedro that your perfect marriage started with you carrying another man's bastard." Olivia drew herself up to her full height, and her voice was cold as ice. "You could try, but everyone who matters already knows the truth. My husband knows, my children know, and the people of San Pedro have known for years. We have lived our lives with honesty and integrity. If you think you can hurt us with the truth, you are mistaken." Before Robert could respond, a voice came from behind Olivia. "Is there a problem here?" Olivia turned to see Henry approaching from the barn. He must have come back early. His face was calm, but his eyes were hard as he looked at the stranger threatening his wife. "Henry, this is Robert Turner," Olivia said, her voice steady. "He was just leaving." Henry's expression did not change, but something dangerous flickered in his eyes. He moved to stand beside Olivia, his presence solid and protective. "So you are the coward who abandoned my wife when she needed you most." "Your wife was my woman first," Robert said, trying to sound tough, but Olivia could hear the fear creeping into his voice. "She was never yours," Henry said quietly. "You do not abandon something that is truly yours. You cast her aside like garbage, and that freed her to find a real man who would treasure her as she deserved." Robert's face flushed red. "That child is my son," Henry interrupted. "Has been since the day he was born. I have been his father in every way that counts. I taught him to walk and ride and read. I sat up with him when he was sick. I have watched him grow into a fine man who would be ashamed to know that his biological father was someone so lacking in character." The door to the house opened, and young Henry came out, now 15 and tall for his age. "Papa, is everything all right?" "Everything is fine, son. This man was just leaving." Robert looked at the tableau before him. Olivia standing proud and unafraid, Henry beside her like a rock, their youngest son watching protectively from the porch. He seemed to realize that he had no power here, that whatever he had hoped to accomplish by coming here was futile. "I see how it is," he muttered. "You have convinced yourself that you are better than me." "I do not have to convince myself of anything," Henry said. "The evidence speaks for itself. Now get off my property before I have you arrested for trespassing." Robert mounted his horse and rode off without another word. Olivia watched him go, feeling nothing but relief that this ghost from her past had finally been laid to rest. Henry put his arm around her shoulders. "Are you all right?" "I am fine," she said, leaning into him. "Better than fine, actually." I looked at him and felt nothing. No anger, no fear, nothing but pity for a man who threw away everything good for his own selfishness. "I am proud of you," Henry said. "You stood up to him." "I had good reason to be brave," Olivia said, looking up at her husband. "I knew you would be here to back me up, even though you were not. And even if you had not come, I knew I could handle him because you have spent 27 years teaching me how strong I am." Young Henry came down from the porch. "Was that man someone bad, Mama?" Olivia exchanged a glance with Henry, then turned to her youngest son. "He was someone from a long time ago, before I met your father. He made some bad choices, but those choices led me here to this ranch, to your father, to all of you children. So in the end, even bad things can lead to good." The boy seemed satisfied with this answer and ran off to tend to his chores. Olivia and Henry stood together in the yard, watching the dust from Robert's horse settle in the distance. "You think he will come back?" Olivia asked. "No," Henry said with certainty. "He saw that he has no power here, nothing to gain. He is gone for good this time." And Henry was right. They never saw Robert Turner again. Years later, they heard through the grapevine that he had died in New Mexico, alone and unmourned. Olivia felt a pang of sadness for a life wasted, but mostly she felt grateful for the path her own life had taken. The Dalton Ranch continued to thrive as the years rolled on. In 1910, Olivia turned 52 and Henry 58. They had been married for 32 years, and their love had only grown deeper and more profound. Thomas was a successful lawyer in Austin with 4 children. Sarah and her husband had 5 children and had taken over much of the day-to-day operations of the ranch. The twins had built their cattle operation into something impressive. Maggie had married her young man from San Antonio and was living there, working in education and causing minor scandals by advocating for women's suffrage. Young Henry, 22 now, had surprised everyone by becoming a minister, serving a small church in San Pedro. On a quiet evening in September, Olivia and Henry sat on the porch swing they had installed years ago, watching the sun set over the land they had built their life on. The house was quiet, just the two of them, though it would be full again come Sunday when the family gathered for dinner. "Do you remember the first time we sat here?" Olivia asked, her head on Henry's shoulder. "I remember every moment with you," Henry said. "But yes, I remember that night. You were scared to be alone with me, afraid I would expect things you were not ready to give." "And you were so patient," Olivia said. "So gentle. You let me set the pace for everything." "I would have waited forever for you," Henry said simply. They swung in comfortable silence for a while, the creaking of the chain of familiar music. The ranch stretched out before them, acres of land they had cultivated and cared for, buildings they had built, fences they had mended. It was a legacy of love and hard work, something they could be proud of. "I want you to know," Olivia said suddenly, "that finding you, marrying you, building this life with you has been the greatest adventure of my life. I could not have imagined that day in your barn that I would end up here, so happy, so loved, so blessed." "The feeling is entirely mutual," Henry assured her. "You turned my house into a home, my solitary existence into a rich, full life. You gave me children and grandchildren and more love than one man deserves." "You deserve all the love in the world," Olivia said fiercely. "You are the best man I have ever known, Henry Dalton." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, they sat together, two souls who had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances and built something beautiful and lasting. Their love story had started with desperation and kindness, but it had bloomed into something extraordinary. Years continued to pass, each one bringing new joys and new challenges. They lost friends and loved ones, welcomed new grandchildren and even great-grandchildren into the world. The ranch changed hands gradually, with Sarah and her husband taking over more of the responsibility as Henry and Olivia aged. In 1920, they celebrated their 42nd wedding anniversary with all of their children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren gathered around them. Thomas gave a toast that made everyone cry. "To my parents," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "My mother, who faced the hardest moment of her life with courage and dignity. And my father, who saw a woman in need and chose kindness over judgment. Their love has been the foundation on which all of our lives are built. May we all be so lucky to find a love as true and lasting as theirs." Olivia and Henry, both now in their 60s, held hands and accepted the cheers and well wishes of their family. They had built something that would outlast them, a legacy of love that would ripple through generations. As the party wound down and their family began to head home, young Henry, now the Reverend Henry Dalton, pulled his parents aside. "I want you to know," he said, "that I have used your story in my sermons. Not the specifics, not the details that are yours alone, but the message. That we are called to show kindness to strangers, to help those in need without judgment. That sometimes our greatest blessings come from our moments of greatest generosity. I hope you tell them," Olivia said, "that the blessing went both ways. Your father saved me, but I like to think I saved him too, from a life of loneliness and isolation." "You absolutely did," Henry agreed, kissing his wife's temple. The years of the 1920s brought more change. Henry's health began to decline, his heart not as strong as it once was. He could no longer work the ranch as he once had, but he still oversaw operations from the porch, offering advice and guidance to Sarah and her children, who now ran things day to day. Olivia remained strong and vital, her mind sharp and her body still capable, though she moved more slowly than she once had. She spent her days cooking for the family, tending her garden, and writing letters to her far-flung children and grandchildren. On a warm afternoon in August of 1928, exactly 50 years after Olivia had first hidden in Henry's barn, they decided to take a walk out to that old barn, which still stood though it was no longer used for much beyond storage. Henry moved slowly now, leaning on a cane, but he insisted on making the journey. Olivia walked beside him, her hand on his arm, steadying him. Inside the barn, they climbed slowly up to the loft, Henry pausing several times to catch his breath. When they finally made it up, they sat in the hay, much as Olivia had done 50 years before. "This is where it all started," Henry said, looking around. "This is where my life was saved," Olivia agreed. "Do you think if you could go back, knowing everything that would happen, would you still run away with Robert Turner? Would you still make the choices that led you here?" Olivia thought about it seriously. "The pain I went through was real. The fear, the shame, the desperation. Those were not small things, but they led me here to you, to our family, to this beautiful life. So yes, I would make the same choices. Every one of them." Henry took her hand. "I am glad you did. I am glad that path led you to my barn, to my life, to my heart." They sat together in the hayloft where their story began. Two people who had found each other against all odds and built a love that had lasted half a century. In the spring of 1930, Henry Dalton passed away peacefully in his sleep, with Olivia holding his hand. He was 78 years old and had lived a full, rich life surrounded by love. His funeral was attended by hundreds of people from San Pedro and beyond, all coming to pay respects to a man who had been known for his integrity, his kindness, and his deep love for his family. Olivia grieved deeply, but with the knowledge that she had been blessed beyond measure. She had loved and been loved completely. She had built a family and a legacy. She had survived the worst that life could throw at her and emerged stronger. She lived another 8 years, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, telling stories of the old days and passing on the wisdom she had gained through a long life. She taught her granddaughters to make bread and preserve fruit. She taught her grandsons the value of treating women with respect and kindness. She told all of them, over and over, the story of how she had found their grandfather, or rather, how he had found her. Olivia Thompson Dalton passed away in her sleep in October of 1938, at the age of 80. She was buried beside Henry on the ranch they had built together, under a spreading oak tree with a view of the land they had loved. At her funeral, Reverend Henry Dalton, now an old man himself, delivered the eulogy. "My mother's life was defined not by the hardship she endured, but by the love she found. She taught us that it is never too late to start over, that kindness can change lives, that love can heal even the deepest wounds. She and my father showed us what it means to build a life together, to face challenges hand in hand, to create a legacy that will outlast them both." The Dalton Ranch remained in the family for generations, each one adding their own chapter to the story. Thomas's children and grandchildren, Sarah's descendants, the twins' legacy, Maggie's children, and young Henry's offspring all carried forward the values that Olivia and Henry had instilled. The story of how Olivia and Henry met became family legend, told and retold at gatherings and celebrations. How a desperate young woman had hidden in a barn, and how the owner of that barn had climbed up and asked her to stay. How that simple act of kindness had blossomed into a love story for the ages, a family that spanned generations, a legacy of love and acceptance and generosity. In the main house on the Dalton Ranch, now owned by Sarah's great-granddaughter, there hangs a photograph from 1925. It shows Olivia and Henry surrounded by their children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. They are sitting on the porch swing, his arm around her shoulders, both of them smiling at the camera. The love in their eyes is clear even in the faded photograph, a testament to a bond that lasted from that fateful day in August 1878 until death parted them, and perhaps even beyond. And in the old barn, which has been preserved as part of the family history, there is a plaque that tells the story simply. In this barn, on August 15, 1878, Olivia Thompson found refuge. Henry Dalton found his future wife. Together, they built a legacy of love that continues to this day. Their story reminds all who hear it that our lowest moments can lead to our greatest blessings, that kindness has power beyond measure, and that true love can emerge from the most unexpected circumstances. Olivia and Henry Dalton's love story, born in a hayloft in San Pedro, Texas, became a beacon of hope and a testament to the transformative power of compassion and love.